used to... That's not it! Oh, it's the...
A tiny piece.
Precisely. Meanwhile, its name...
Sisters and being...
There he is.
Even think about running off... You're up.
Bring your...
Is traveling with a...
This man was like...
Ida. This is the sword of the... Where is it headed?
Yes, I do.
And leads.
Kneel before you...
Face again.
Let me introduce myself.
Here. Where's Jonathan?
This witch is...
Was executed today.
Your hand. This one is done.
Iron Mask, known in Russia and China under its original title Vi 2, Journey to China, or The Mystery of the Dragon Seal, is a 2019 Russian-Chinese fantasy adventure film directed by Oleg Stepchenko. It is the sequel to Vi, a 2014 film loosely based on the Nikolai Gogol horror story of the same name. Before diving into the story of Iron Mask itself, it helps to understand what came before it, because the film drops the audience in the middle of an already established world without much hand-holding. Wikipedia. The predecessor, Vi, released in English-speaking territories as Forbidden Empire or Forbidden Kingdom, is centered on a British cartographer named Jonathan Green who travels east to make newer, better maps in the early 18th century. In that first film, Jonathan is commissioned by Tsar Peter the Great of Russia to map the eastern territories of the Russian Empire, and he encounters all manner of supernatural horrors along the way. Iron Mask picks up directly from those events, with Jonathan Green once again at the center of a globe-spanning adventure, though this time, the canvas is even larger, stretching from the Tower of London to the far reaches of China, and the mythology shifts from Slavic folklore to Chinese legend. Alternate ending. The world of ancient China, the Dragon and the Wizard Wars. The film opens with a mythological prologue set in ancient China, establishing the fantastical stakes that will drive the plot forward. In ancient China, a magical dragon whose eyelashes produce a tea that cures any disease has established a cult of white wizards who guard it. This dragon is not merely a beast, it is a sacred, living natural wonder, the source of miraculous healing properties contained within the fine hairs of its eyelashes. The white wizards who protect the creature are a spiritual order of guardians, devoted to using the dragon's gifts for the good of the people. Wikipedia. However, as is so often the case in stories of great power, corruption is not far behind. Some of the white wizards turned into greedy black wizards and ignited a civil war. To harvest more tea, they stopped trimming the dragon's eyelashes, sending it into a deep slumber. This is the central tragedy of the mythological backstory. The very act of overexploiting the dragon's gift destroys the balance that allowed it to flourish. By ceasing the ritual trimming of the dragon's eyelashes, which apparently required careful, respectful maintenance, the black wizards caused the great creature to fall into an enchanted, comatose sleep, cutting off the supply of miraculous tea and plunging the land into darkness under their tyrannical rule. Wikipedia. The leader of the White Wizards, a sage master known as Et al., played by Jackie Chan in a role that would cause considerable controversy among Western viewers, refuses to surrender. But the Black Wizards proved too powerful for him to overcome alone. They exiled the leader of the White Wizards, Et al., into the Tower of London, while his daughter Chenlan was sent to a Russian prison. This separation of father and daughter across continents sets in motion the chain of events that will bring together all of the film's disparate characters. Wikipedia. Jonathan Green's predicament, imprisoned for someone else's crime. When we catch up with Jonathan Green at the start of the main story, he finds himself in a deeply unfair situation. He was imprisoned because his client for the map from the first film, the Russian Tsar Peter the Great, has been replaced by an imposter, while the real Tsar is held with et al. In the Tower of London. In other words, the cartographer's royal patron, the man whose commission gave Jonathan his mission, his livelihood, and his status, is no longer on the throne. An impersonator has seized power, and the Real Peter the Great has been secreted away into the same London prison holding the exiled Chinese wizard et al. Wikipedia. Because Jonathan is known to have worked closely with the real Tsar, the false ruler sees him as a liability, a man who might expose the deception. Keeping Jonathan locked in a Russian prison is convenient. He cannot travel to Europe, cannot speak with other monarchs or dignitaries, and cannot blow the lid off the fraud. However, through the intervention of his stepfather's influence, Jonathan is eventually released from incarceration. Because of his stepfather's influence, he is released but sent to map the east of Russia to keep him from informing Europe of the fraud. The mission to map the Russian Far East, which sounds like a prestigious cartographic commission, is really a political exile, a way of keeping Jonathan far away and occupied, so that he never endangers the impostor's grip on power while imprisoned in the Russian jail. Jonathan makes a fateful acquaintance. His fellow prisoner is none other than Chenlan, played by Helen Yao, the daughter of the White Wizard Master et al. Who was banished to London. Chenlan has been sent to a Russian prison specifically to keep her separated from her father and from China, where her presence might inspire resistance against the Black Wizards. What makes this encounter particularly interesting is a clever piece of misdirection. Mistaking her for a boy, he takes Chenlan with him as his assistant, who agrees to take him to China. Jonathan, unaware of Chenlan's true identity as a Chinese princess and the daughter of the imprisoned master wizard, simply sees a sharp, resourceful young person who could be useful as an assistant on his long journey east. Chenlan, for her part, has every reason to accept the arrangement. Traveling with Jonathan gives her a path back to China, where she can attempt to free her father and liberate the land from the Black Wizards. Each person believes they are getting something useful out of the arrangement, while both are carrying secrets the other does not yet know. Wikipedia. The growing relationship between Jonathan and Chenlan forms the emotional spine of the film's main narrative. As they travel together across vast and treacherous terrain, encountering bizarre creatures, deadly martial arts masters, and the strange spectacles of a world mixing Eastern myth with Western science, their partnership deepens. Chenlan gradually trusts Jonathan enough to reveal her true identity and her purpose, while Jonathan comes to understand that his map-making mission is entangled in something far grander and more dangerous than he imagined. Meanwhile, back in England, the Tower of London holds two very unlikely cellmates, the Real Tsar Peter the Great of Russia and the White Wizard Master et al., that is, Jackie Chan's character. Master is imprisoned in London under the warden James Hook, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. James Hook, a deliberate nod to the fictional Captain Hook of Peter Pan lore, is the iron-fisted warden of the tower, a formidable physical presence who keeps his famous prisoners under lock and key with ruthless efficiency. The absurdist pairing of Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger, two global action icons, was the film's primary marketing hook. Their scenes together in the tower are played with a certain winking humor, the two of them sparring and bickering in confinement. IMDb. At the tower, Peter and et al. Manage to alert Jonathan's wife Emma to their presence after finding one of his letters. Emma Dudley, Jonathan's wife back in England, becomes a crucial secondary protagonist once she learns that the real Tsar is imprisoned in London. She is also the daughter of Lord Dudley, played by Charles Dance, a character carried over from the first film. The revelation that Jonathan's patron, Peter the Great, is rotting in a cell while a fraud sits on the Russian throne galvanizes Emma into action. She now has two missions: expose the imposter and find a way to free the prisoners. Wikipedia. Realizing Jonathan's assistant is et al.'s daughter, they stage an escape, where he stays back to fight the warden Hook. He gives Peter his magical medallion to lead him to his daughter. This escape sequence is one of the film's most energetically staged set pieces. Et al., the Kung Fu master, confronts Hook in combat, giving the film the Jackie Chan vs. Arnold Schwarzenegger fight that the trailers promised audiences. The fight itself is modest compared to the legends involved, but it serves a narrative purpose. Et al. Sacrifices his freedom temporarily, staying behind to battle Hook while Peter the Great is able to slip away with the magical medallion. The medallion, a mystical object tied to the dragon and its dragon seal mythology, will guide Peter to Chenlan and thus reconnect the exiled wizard's legacy with his daughter. Wikipedia. Peter and Emma sneak aboard a Russian ship set for China. With the medallion in hand, Peter the Great and Emma Dudley board a vessel bound for the Far East, beginning their own parallel journey toward the same destination that Jonathan and Chenlan are traveling to by land. Wikipedia. Arrival in China, the two-faced queen and her deceptions. When Jonathan and Chenlan finally arrive in China, specifically at the tower where the sleeping dragon is kept, they find a land living under oppression and illusion. Jonathan and Chenlan see that the black wizards and their leader, the two-faced queen, are exploiting and overtaxing the townsfolk. The people are impoverished and kept in line through a combination of excessive taxation and supernatural fear. The queen, a figure of malevolent cunning, has built her power on two interlocking deceptions. Wikipedia. Jonathan is taken before the queen, who has assumed Chenlan's appearance. Using smokes and mirrors, she pretends that she is wielding magic and controlling the dragon to keep the people in line. This is the film's central visual conceit. The queen is two-faced in a literal as well as metaphorical sense. She has adopted Chenlan's face and identity, presenting herself to the populace as their rightful princess and using a mechanical robotic dragon, a spectacular piece of clockwork trickery, to convince the people that she commands the great creature. The real dragon sleeps on, forgotten and untended, while the queen's false machine performs fire-breathing spectacles for a terrified and awestruck populace. Wikipedia. Jonathan, ever the rationalist mapmaker from the Age of Enlightenment, instantly suspects that something is wrong with the queen's display of supposed magical power. Jonathan tricks her into making a map of her territory to spy on her, but is caught. Employing the very skill that defines him, cartography, Jonathan attempts to use the pretense of drawing a map to gather intelligence on the queen's fortress and her vulnerabilities. It is a clever bit of professional improvisation, using his expertise as a weapon. But the queen is not so easily fooled. Jonathan is captured and thrown into imprisonment within the tower. With Jonathan captured and Chenlan isolated, the situation looks bleak. But the arrival of Peter the Great and Emma Dudley turns the tide. Peter and Emma arrive at the town and meet with Chanli. Together, they devise a plan to attack the tower to defeat the queen, free Jonathan, and reunite Chanli with the dragon. Wikipedia. This brings the film's various strands into alignment. The real Tsar of Russia, the English cartographer's wife, and the Chinese princess form an unlikely coalition, a little cross-cultural fellowship bound together by their opposing purposes to the queen's tyranny. The plan they devise draws on each person's strengths. Peter the Great commands loyalty and martial authority, Emma brings cunning and determination, and Chenlan, as the true princess and the spiritual heir to the white wizard tradition, alone has the ancestral bond with the dragon that can awaken it. The assault on the tower is chaotic and large-scale. Although Emma is captured and set to be executed alongside Jonathan, they are freed by the Cossacks when they destroy the robotic dragon the queen uses to deceive the people. The destruction of the mechanical dragon, a symbolic moment as much as a tactical one, shatters the central pillar of the queen's power over the people. Without the false dragon to inspire awe and dread, her authority crumbles. When the robotic imposter is exposed as mere machinery, the illusion of her magical dominion collapses. The Cossacks, fierce warriors loyal to the true Tsar, take advantage of the chaos to free Jonathan and Emma from execution. After Chanli has freed the dragon, she fights the queen in a duel. The climax of the film comes down to a personal confrontation between Chenlan, the true princess, the rightful heir, and the two-faced queen, the usurper. Chenlan awakens the great dragon from its long enchanted sleep, restoring the creature to its full, magnificent vitality. With the real dragon's awakening, the black wizards lose their primary source of leverage over the land. The duel between the two women is fierce, and Chanli is defeated, but after the queen's disguise is figured out by Jonathan, she falls to her death, as she is unworthy of using the medallion. It is Jonathan, the outsider, the rational Western cartographer who has spent the entire film learning to take magic seriously, who delivers the decisive blow, not through combat but through observation. He is the one who sees through the queen's disguise, exposing her to all present as a fraud and an impersonator. The medallion, that mystical object associated with the dragon's seal, judges her, it deems her unworthy, and she plunges to her death, destroyed by the very symbol of power she sought to wield illegitimately. Wikipedia. Resolution and aftermath. The film's conclusion wraps up its multiple plot threads with efficiency. Chanli assumes the throne, while Atul is pardoned and travels to China with Hook. Chenlan, restored to her identity and her birthright, takes her rightful place as ruler of the kingdom. Her father, the White Wizard Master Atul, is released from his long imprisonment in the Tower of London and travels at last to China, reunited with his daughter after years of enforced exile. In a remarkable character turn, even James Hook, the imposing warden who had kept Atul locked away, accompanies him to China. What begins as an adversarial relationship between jailer and prisoner transforms, through their shared ordeal, into something approximating companionship. Wikipedia. The real Peter the Great, his true identity now vindicated, can presumably return to Russia and reclaim his throne from the impersonator who has been ruling in his place. Jonathan and Emma are reunited. The dragon, awakened, is free once more. The magical tea from its eyelashes, properly and respectfully harvested, through the ritual trimming that the greedy black wizards had abandoned, can once again cure the sick and nourish the land. Film context and reception. The film stars Jason Flemyng and Charles Dance, who reprise their roles from the first film, alongside Rutger Hauer, Jackie Chan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Helen Yao. It is a genuine international co-production, produced by the Russian Film Group and China Film Group Corporation, with a budget of $48 million. Despite the marquee cast and ambitious scope, the film earned only $8.7 million at the box office. Wikipedia. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film received a score of 22% from 32 critics, with an average rating of 3 May, 10. The website's critics' consensus reads that Iron Mask unites Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger for a bizarrely misguided adventure that aims for epic fantasy with unintentionally hilarious results. Critics and reviewers largely found it to be a disorganized, overstuffed adventure that never quite cohered into a satisfying whole, though some noted a certain delirious charm to its excess. Arnold Schwarzenegger was nominated at the 41st Golden Raspberry Awards for Worst Supporting Actor for his role as Warden Hook. Wikipedia. Despite its troubled critical reception, Iron Mask is a genuinely ambitious, globe-trotting fantasy spectacle, a film that tries to fuse Russian folklore, Chinese mythology, Enlightenment-era science, and Hollywood action movie star power into a single grand adventure. Whether or not it entirely succeeds, there is nothing quite like it. A story spanning England, Russia, and China, where a cartographer, a Tsar, a princess, a kung fu master, and a warden all converge on a sleeping dragon and the fate of a kingdom. You said, explain reviews of Iron Mask 2019 movie in 300 words. When Iron Mask finally reached Western audiences, UK cinemas in April 2020 and US digital platforms in November 2020, the critical response was, by most measures, decisively negative. The film earned a Tomatometer score of just 21% from 33 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, alongside a popcorn meter of 25% from audience ratings. On Metacritic, it received a weighted average score of 32 out of 100 based on critic reviews. These numbers place it firmly in the territory of films considered artistic and commercial failures by the mainstream press, and yet, as we shall see, the story of how reviewers experienced the film is considerably more nuanced, divided, and at times entertainingly conflicted than those bare numbers suggest. Rotten Tomatoes Metacritic. The consensus verdict, as captured by Rotten Tomatoes, put it plainly, the film unites Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger for a bizarrely misguided adventure that aims for epic fantasy with unintentionally hilarious results. That phrase, unintentionally hilarious, becomes a key touchstone across almost every serious review the film received, and it encapsulates the central critical debate. Is Iron Mask a disaster, or is it a disaster that accidentally becomes something worth watching? Rotten Tomatoes. The Chan Schwarzenegger bait-and switch, marketing versus reality. The single most consistent complaint across virtually every review, professional and amateur alike, is the film's deeply misleading promotional campaign. The Iron Mask has one selling point that any trailer keenly forces on viewers: Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger are going to have a fight. The screen time given to this event in promotional material would lead the less cynical to believe it makes up roughly 90 of the film's 120-minute runtime. Almost every critic noted with varying degrees of exasperation that this was simply not the case. Love horror. Anyone tricked by trailers into expecting a Chan and Schwarzenegger-led epic will be disappointed. The duo, who are also listed as producers, have been front and center of the movie's marketing but feature only briefly in the finished film. Empire magazine's Ul Horner was particularly pointed on this score, writing that the film could have been a tantalizing coming together of two icons of action cinema but instead feels oddly anemic. The description of their roles in the film, and the gap between what was promised and what was delivered, became almost a running theme in reviews. Schwarzenegger plays James Hook, a prison warden at the Tower of London, who has no bearing on the plot whatsoever. The CBR review by Josh Bell noted dryly that both Chan and Schwarzenegger appear, albeit much more briefly than their presence in the promotional materials would indicate. Writing for the AV Club, critic Ignacy Vishnevetsky captured Schwarzenegger's limited contribution with an almost affectionate mockery, describing a scene where he wears a moustache, wig, and tricorn hat in the role of an English dungeon keeper, yelling, "Where would you go?" It's the Towatha Love Horror review, written by Sam Draper, put it bluntly. What surprised him was what a confusing mess of colliding storylines, bizarre dubbing and truly awful CG awaited viewers who were tempted in by the Arnie versus Jackie Chan top-of-the-card billing. The Action Elite called it even more directly, suggesting the film may be one of the worst movies Arnie and Jackie Chan have ever put their names to. Love horror. The Action Elite. The plot problem: too many threads, too little coherence. Beyond the casting disappointment, critics universally identified the film's sprawling, incoherent narrative as its deepest structural flaw. The film blends a myriad of genres ranging from fantasy, martial arts, comedy, and action, as cartographer Jonathan Green gets mixed up in black wizardry, dragons, and pirates as he maps China. With so much to balance, it is hard for the Iron Mask to find its tone. Flick Feast. The Flick Feast review by Katie Smith-Wong noted that high-profile roles were reduced to glorified cameos, ranging from Charles Dance and the late Rutger Hauer to Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that they subsequently did little to elevate the film past its pantomime premise, poor dubbing and laughable supporting performances. Flick Feast. One audience reviewer on Rotten Tomatoes described the film as feeling like it should have been twice as long just to make sense, with its plot messy and confusing, jumping between storylines without direction or purpose, noting it often feels as though they cut out 2 hours of footage that might have explained what's going on. Rotten Tomatoes. The cultural complexity of the production added another layer of confusion for critics. When you learn that the film is a Chinese-Russian co-production, some of the strange choices around tone and dialogue start to make a bit more sense. It is caught between several filmmaking styles that never quite fit together. CBR's Josh Bell elaborated, the production history of Iron Mask is only slightly less confusing than the movie itself, a polyglot international co-production in which plot, dialogue, and performances seem to have all been lost in translation. Rotten Tomatoes CBR. The alternate ending review, while more whimsically forgiving, still noted that the convoluted unraveling of the plot gave off a strong making-it-up-as-we-go-along vibe, comparing the film to the absolute stupidest puppy dog that can't stop tripping over its paws and bashing into walls at top speed. Alternate ending. Common Sense Media highlighted the specific problem of supporting characters. Characters like Peter the Great and Miss Dudley feel bolted on for a Russian domestic audience familiar with the franchise, while who the characters are, where they are supposed to be from, and their motivations are all poorly explained throughout. The same review also observed that forgettable villains are introduced and then defeated, and mystical creatures appear mainly to liven up the action as the film becomes increasingly tedious and difficult to follow. Common Sense Media. Visual effects and technical craft, a consensus disaster. One of the few areas where critics reached unanimous agreement was in their verdict on the film's CGI and visual effects, and it was not a flattering verdict. The near-constant green screen and digital environments drew consistent criticism for breaking immersion and dragging the spectacle down. The Action Elite noted that Jonathan Green teams up with allies to confront a fake princess, culminating in a CGI dragon and a boring fight scene that never once gets the adrenaline pumping, while the near-constant green screen is distracting and it all looks so fake that you are never really pulled into the world. The Action Elite. Empire found the same issue undermining what could have been the film's best sequence, the one scene Chan and Schwarzenegger share together, an entertaining prison riot punch-up, isn't without its thrills, but ultimately suffers the same problems that plague the rest of the Iron Mask: shoddy special effects, comically bad dialogue and too many ideas resulting in action that's too hard to follow. Empire. The Guardian's Peter Bradshaw wrote acidly that viewers are stuck with endless, weightless green screen shenanigans involving a dragon whose eyelashes are used to create tea and a cast of thousands who drift across various CGI landscapes. The word weightless is key here. It is not merely that the effects are unconvincing, but that they strip the action of any physical stakes or tension. When a dragon made of pixels fights a villain made of pixels, on a background assembled from pixels, emotional investment becomes almost impossible to maintain. Wikipedia. A Letterboxd reviewer, speaking from an audience perspective, echoed this harshly. The CGI is described as horrific, the stunts lazy, and the action scenes outrageously silly, with the added note that no one is ever shot, despite the endless guns in the movie. Another near-universal technical complaint concerned the film's English dubbing, which critics and audiences alike found to be a major barrier to engagement. Iron Mask is a Russian-Chinese production that was shot in multiple languages and then adapted for English-speaking markets through dubbing, and the results struck most reviewers as deeply unconvincing. The voice dubbing is described as especially poor. Characters' lips and voices are constantly out of sync, making the film even harder to take seriously. This problem was noted with almost weary universality. It was not simply that the dubbing was technically imperfect, but that the tonal mismatch between the dubbed voices and the performances on screen created a dissonance that undercut any dramatic or comedic moment the filmmakers attempted. One user on IMDb noted sardonically that the dubbing of every character and every single line was reminiscent of the Tower of Babel. Shooting style of spaghetti westerns, invoking the old Italian genre. Films that were famously shot without synchronized dialogue and later dubbed into multiple languages for different markets. The comparison is telling. Iron Mask felt, to many viewers, like a relic of a much older filmmaking era, a kind of international patchwork production from the 1970s that had somehow materialized in the age of CGI blockbusters. Not every reviewer arrived at pure condemnation. A small but genuine contingent of critics and viewers found something to enjoy in Iron Mask, sometimes explicitly, sometimes through the lens of guilty pleasure or trash appreciation. The AV Club's Ignacy Vishnevetsky gave the film a C+ grade and offered what might be its most perceptive critical defense. He acknowledged that at least 2/3 of Iron Mask is funny on purpose, though the rest is eventually dragged down by compounding inertia. This is a significant observation. It implies that the film is not uniformly incompetent, that director Stepchenko and the cast are, at least some of the time, in on the joke, playing the absurdity for laughs with genuine intentionality. Rotten Tomatoes. The Eye for Film review offered a wry but not entirely dismissive verdict. The reviewer gave it 2 stars, one each for Messrs. Chan and Schwarzenegger, and admitted that while there was little else to draw a viewer in, the film fascinates those interested in the bizarre processes of international filmmaking, saying simply, "I was entertained, but sometimes not on purpose." Eye for Film. One reviewer quoted on Rotten Tomatoes from film-authority.com was more openly positive. He gave it 3 out of 5 and wrote that those of us who enjoy brainless entertainment will enjoy Iron Mask. It's a daft, family-friendly romp that's sold on the back of 2 very big star names, but provides plenty of silly fun for those keen for a fix of fresh air escapism. Rotten Tomatoes. On Metacritic, at least one user reviewer gave it a positive assessment in the spirit of camp. One viewer described it as solidly in the so bad it's good genre, campy, with cool special effects, dumb fun. Metacritic. The Letterboxd community produced perhaps the most entertainingly ambivalent response. One reviewer called it simultaneously the worst thing I've ever seen and the best thing I've ever seen, and concluded that despite all the film's obvious technical failures, the 2 hours I spent watching this abandoned musical, yes, you read that right, were some of the best 2 hours I've ever had. Letterboxd. The Schwarzenegger Razzie nomination. One formal institutional verdict on the film came in the form of an awards nomination, though not the kind any participant would celebrate. Arnold Schwarzenegger was nominated at the 41st Golden Raspberry Awards for Worst Supporting Actor for his role as Warden Hook. This nomination cemented the film's status in the popular imagination as one of the signature bad movies of its year, a distinction that the Razzies, despite their satirical framing, take with a certain amount of cultural seriousness. Wikipedia. That Schwarzenegger specifically, rather than any other cast member, received this dubious honor speaks to what reviewers found most frustrating. His character James Hook is almost entirely irrelevant to the plot despite being front and center in all the marketing. The Razzies essentially nominated him for the sin of high-profile superfluity. The lost in translation argument. Several more thoughtful reviewers tried to extend sympathy to the film by contextualizing it as a cultural object that was never truly designed for Western consumption. CBR noted that its predecessor VAI was a years-long ordeal for director Oleg Stepchenko, whose efforts were validated by the film's success, and that Iron Mask shifts most of its action to China presumably to take advantage of available financing. This framing positions the film not as a vanity project gone wrong, but as a calculated international co-production that prioritized its Russian and Chinese markets and simply failed to translate effectively for English-speaking audiences. CBR. The Flickfeast review observed that the high-concept fantasy action feels too ambitious a project for director Oleg Stepchenko, as he evidently struggles to deliver his collaborative screenplay. This is a more charitable reading than pure incompetence. It suggests the vision may have been genuine but the execution was overwhelmed by the complexity of serving multiple national cinemas, multiple languages, and multiple sets of audience expectations simultaneously. Flickfeast. Audience scores versus critical scores, a telling gap. The relatively higher audience engagement on some platforms, compared to the critical wipeout, suggests that Iron Mask does have a real, if niche, constituency. One IMDb user captured the spirit of this forgiving audience: "Do not watch this film for the screenplay, or to discover something new, no, it's pure entertainment. And I have seen worse, much worse." If you have a childish soul and you miss the epic adventure films with an Asian tendency, this film could please you. IMDb. That framing, a childish soul, epic adventure films with an Asian tendency, points to an audience that is not watching Iron Mask against the standard of prestige international cinema, but against the standard of the Saturday afternoon fantasy adventure. Judged on that scale, with lowered expectations and a high tolerance for chaos, the film becomes something more like a colorful, exhausting, occasionally delightful romp. Final verdict: a remarkable failure with accidental charm. The overwhelming critical consensus is that Iron Mask is a failed film, poorly dubbed, visually unconvincing, narratively impenetrable, and guilty of the gravest marketing sin of overpromising and underdelivering on its most commercially appealing element. The Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger fight that the trailers sold audiences on is real, but brief and underwhelming, yet something curious runs through even the harshest reviews, a kind of bewildered fascination. The alternate ending put it memorably, describing the film as possessing boundlessly energetic stupidity, never done throwing goofy matinee movie material at the audience, and while aggressively pointless, there is something engaging about its proudly threadbare showmanship. That is not a recommendation exactly, but it is not a dismissal either. Iron Mask is, in its own chaotic way, an object of genuine cinematic curiosity, an enormous, expensive, multinational production. That fell spectacularly short of its ambitions and, in falling, became something stranger and more memorable than a competent film might have been. Iron Mask is not simply one film with one name, it is a movie that accumulated an extraordinary number of identities across different countries and markets, making it one of the most multiply-titled films of recent years. Released in English-speaking countries as Iron Mask, The Iron Mask, Iron Dragon, The Mystery of the Dragon Seal, and The Dragon Seal, its original Russian title is Tajna Pechati Drakona, meaning The Mystery of the Dragon Seal, and its Chinese title is. In Malaysia it was released as The Mystery of the Dragon Seal, in the Philippines as The Dragon Seal, and in Germany as Furst der Dämonen 2, the same franchise that translated the original Vai as Prince of Demons. With all its variations, the film has circulated under no fewer than 8 or 9 distinct English-language titles alone. Wikipedia. It is a 2019 fantasy-adventure film directed by Oleg Stepchenko, and is the sequel to Vai, a 2014 film loosely based on the Nikolai Gogol story of the same name. Classifying it by genre is almost as complicated as settling on a title. The film blends a myriad of genres ranging from fantasy, martial arts, comedy, and action, making it difficult to place neatly in any single category. It is set in the early 18th century and spans locations across England, Russia, and China, which further reflects its unusual hybrid identity as a Russian-Chinese co-production with a prominently Western-facing cast. Wikipedia Flick Feast. The predecessor, Vai, 2014, and its remarkable success. Understanding Iron Mask requires understanding its predecessor, because the first film's extraordinary domestic success is the direct reason why the sequel was made on such an ambitious scale. Vai, 2014, is a Russian-Ukrainian fantasy film loosely based on the Nikolai Gogol story of the same name, directed by Oleg Stepchenko. It was released in cinemas in Russia on the 30th of January, 2014, and later released in the United States as Forbidden Empire and in the United Kingdom as Forbidden Kingdom. The film had been in production by Film Group and Murrins Group Entertainment since December 2005 and stopped several times due to lack of funding. That 9-year journey to the screen, plagued by financial crises and production interruptions, produced a film that shocked the Russian film industry with its commercial performance. Vi reportedly took an estimated $17 million in its opening weekend, making it on track for a record opening for a 3D film in Russia. Its total budget was $26 million, against which it earned $38.9 million at the box office. Wikipedia +2. Despite Forbidden Empire going direct-to-DVD in most Western countries, the movie was the highest-grossing film in Russia in 2014, paving the way for the sequel and the casting of international stars such as Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jackie Chan, and Rutger Hauer. The lesson the producers drew from Vi's success was clear: go bigger, go more international, and spend more money. The result was Iron Mask. IMDb. Director, Oleg Stepchenko. The film's director, Oleg Stepchenko, is a Russian filmmaker who had been working on the Vi franchise since 2006. The Russian-made Vi, 2014, was a moderate international hit for Stepchenko. He threw most of the original Gogol story out to create his own narrative. His approach to both films is that of a filmmaker who takes the broadest possible inspiration from his source material and then pursues an entirely original fantasy adventure in the spirit of international blockbuster entertainment. The screenplay for Iron Mask was written by Stepchenko alongside Dmitry Pales and Alexei Petrikhin. Stepchenko had the unusual challenge of making a film that would work simultaneously for Russian, Chinese, and eventually Western audiences, three very different film cultures with different expectations around fantasy, action, comedy, and historical adventure. Most critics who examined the film concluded that the attempt to satisfy all three audiences resulted in a film that fully satisfied none of them. Wikipedia. Production companies and international co-production structure. Iron Mask stands as a remarkable case study in international co-production complexity. The primary production companies were the Russian Film Group and China Film Group Corporation, but the full list of companies involved in the film's financing and production was considerably longer. The production consortium included Fetisov Illusion, China Film Company Limited, Sparkle Roll Media, China Film and Media, Stereotech, CTB Film Company, Murrins Group Union Film Company, Russian Film Group Corporation, TW, Beijing, Culture Investment Company Limited, Jupil Holdings Limited, Shenzhen Meetan International Education Limited, Dongfang Tia Joshua Film and TV Company Limited, and Pass Media, Beijing, Company Limited. Wikipedia Moria Reviews. This extraordinary list of production partners, combining Russian state-adjacent production infrastructure with a constellation of Chinese media and investment companies, reflects just how large-scale the international ambitions for the film were. It also helps explain why the post-production process became entangled in legal complications. With so many production partners across two different countries and legal systems, disputes over creative control and financial arrangements were almost structurally inevitable. The financial facts of Iron Mask are stark. The film was made on a budget of $48 million and earned only $8.7 million at the global box office. This represents a substantial loss, particularly when distribution, marketing, and exhibition costs are factored in on top of the production budget. By any commercial measure, the film failed to recoup its investment. Wikipedia. This is a significant step up in spending from the original Vi, whose $26 million budget had been recovered and exceeded. The decision to more than double the budget, banking on the star power of Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger and the expanded scope of a China-set adventure, was a calculated gamble that did not pay off. The film's limited Western release, digital only in the United States, combined with its troubled path to market and mixed to negative critical reception, severely limited its commercial reach. The casting of Iron Mask was one of its most talked about aspects, assembling a genuinely eclectic international ensemble. The film stars Jason Flemyng, Helen Yao, Jackie Chan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Yuri Kolokolnikov, Charles Dance, and Rutger Hauer. Beyond these headline names, the full cast includes Anna Cherina as Miss Dudley, Ma Li as the Witch, Pavel Volia as Menshikov, Christopher Fairbank as Grey, Yu Li as Treasurer, Mengmeng Li as Li Hong, Martin Kleber as the Captain, and Narapornkamal Chaisang as Zomzom. Wikipedia fandom. Jason Flemyng, known from X-Men, First Class, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, and numerous other British productions, is the film's true lead, reprising his role as the cartographer Jonathan Green from the original Vi. Helen Yao, a Chinese actress, plays Chenlan, the hidden princess. Jackie Chan serves as both actor and producer on the film, and Arnold Schwarzenegger plays the Tower of London warden James Hook, a character with an obvious nod to Peter Pan's Captain Hook. Filming schedule and locations. The production of Iron Mask was genuinely global. The film wrapped production in Beijing in February 2017 after lengthy on-again, off-again shoots in the United Kingdom, Russia, and China. This multi-country, multi-year shoot reflects both the ambition of the production and the logistical challenges involved in coordinating a cast and crew across 3 countries on 2 continents. IMDb. The Tower of London sequences, featuring Schwarzenegger as warden and Jackie Chan as prisoner, were filmed to represent an 18th-century English setting, while the vast majority of the film's fantasy sequences and action set pieces were shot in China. Russian sequences depicting Jonathan Green's imprisonment and early journey east were filmed in Russia. The result is a film with genuinely varied physical locations, though critics noted that the heavy reliance on digital effects and green screen compositing often undermined the visual authenticity that location shooting might have provided. Post-production delays and legal disputes. The journey from the end of principal photography in February 2017 to the film's eventual release in 2019 was far from smooth. When the movie entered post-production, legal disputes between the film's producing partners halted its release. The nature of these disputes was not publicly detailed, but the sheer number of production companies involved, stretching across 2 countries with different legal and commercial frameworks, created fertile ground for conflicts over rights, creative control, and financial obligations. Inverse. The release of Vi 2 in Russia was originally scheduled for the 16th of August, 2018 but was subsequently postponed to the 19th of September, 2019, pending censorship approval in China. The film therefore had to satisfy the regulatory requirements of China's film censorship apparatus before it could be released in that market, a significant hurdle given that China is one of the world's largest film markets and the most important commercial territory for the movie's Chinese co-producers. Wikipedia. In 2019, The Hollywood Reporter reported that the film finally set a release date for China and Russia. The Chinese release came first, on the 16th of August, 2019, followed by the Russian release on the 21st of September, 2019. Western releases followed considerably later. The UK received it in April 2020, and the US only got a digital release in November 2020. Inverse. Release history across markets. The staggered global release of Iron Mask is one of the most unusual in recent memory. Most major international productions aim for simultaneous or near-simultaneous global releases. Iron Mask instead trickled out across different territories over more than a year. The film was released in China on the 16th of August, 2019 by Universal Pictures, and in Russia on the 21st of September, 2019. The film was released in the United Kingdom under the title The Iron Mask on the 10th of April, 2020, and was digitally released on demand and on DVD in the United States as Iron Mask on the 24th of November, 2020. In the Philippines, the film was released on the 20th of September, 2019 as The Dragon Seal by Pioneer Films. Wikipedia. This multi-year release window meant that by the time American audiences could watch the film legally, international reviews had already been circulating for over a year, and many Western viewers had already formed strong opinions about it before it reached VOD platforms in their market. Rutger Hauer's connection to the film. One of the most poignant facts surrounding Iron Mask is its association with the late Rutger Hauer. The legendary Dutch actor, best known for his iconic role as Roy Batty in Blade Runner 1982, appears in the film as the British ambassador, a relatively brief role in which, as one reviewer memorably described it, he plays an ambassador arriving in a cart pulled by pigs, looking confused before uttering, "What's going on here?" City on Fire. Rutger Hauer was born on the 23rd of January, 1944 and died on the 19th of July, 2019, just weeks before the film's China release. The film was released a month after he passed away. This gives his brief appearance in Iron Mask a particular significance. It stands as one of the final screen appearances of one of European cinema's most beloved and distinctive talents. His career had spanned over 50 years and more than 170 roles, and the fact that Iron Mask is among his last is one of those bittersweet coincidences of film history. The screenplay is credited to 3 writers, Dmitry Pales, Alexei Petrikhin, and Oleg Stepchenko himself. The narrative draws from several very different source traditions simultaneously. The Chinese mythological elements, the sleeping dragon, the healing tea, the white wizards and black wizards, are original creations for the film. The Man in the Iron Mask thread refers loosely to the historical mystery of an unidentified French prisoner who was incarcerated under Louis XIV, though the film repurposes this legend by applying the Iron Mask motif to the Russian Tsar Peter the Great, who is imprisoned in London. The character of James Hook, Schwarzenegger's warden, is an obvious allusion to the fictional Captain Hook from J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. Wikipedia. Jonathan Green, the English cartographer protagonist, is described as someone whose purpose seems to be bumbling around the world discovering supernatural phenomena that mostly turn out to be Scooby-Doo-style hoaxes. Characterization positions the film squarely in the tradition of Enlightenment-era adventure stories. where the rational Western scientist is perpetually confronted with phenomena that challenge his worldview, a structurally familiar framework that the films used to bridge Eastern mythology with Western characterization. The film's cinematography was handled by Ivan Gudkov and Manchinging, a dual cinematographer credit that reflects the film's production in two very different countries. The editing was done by Arseny Suhin and Petar Zelenov, and the music was composed by Alexandra Magakian. The dual-country production is also visible in the cinematography credit itself. Gudkov handled the Russian production while Ng oversaw the Chinese shooting, and the challenge of maintaining visual consistency across two separate units in two countries, with different lighting conditions, sets, and working methods, contributed to what critics described as an overall visual incoherence. Wikipedia. The film's score by Alexandra Magakian drew little critical attention, positive or negative. It was largely lost in the broader discussion of the film's more conspicuous problems. Planned sequel, Vi 3, Travel to India. Despite Iron Mask's commercial disappointment, plans for a third installment were announced. A sequel, Vi 3, Travel to India, was originally set to be released in 2023, starring Jason Flemyng and Anna Cherina. However, it was delayed for undisclosed reasons. The third film would have continued Jonathan Green's globetrotting adventures into South Asia, presumably following the same formula of dropping a Western cartographer into an Eastern mythological landscape. As of the time of writing, the project has not been released and its current status remains uncertain. Wikipedia. The franchise vision, a trilogy of increasingly international adventures for Jonathan Green, moving from Eastern Europe to China to India, reflects an ambitious attempt to create a Russia-led fantasy adventure series that could compete with Hollywood franchises on a global scale. Whether that vision can be realized, especially given the financial losses of Iron Mask, remains an open question. The Jackie Chan-Schwarzenegger meeting, a historic first. One fact that was prominently marketed as a selling point deserves acknowledgement. Iron Mask genuinely does represent the first time Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger appeared together on screen in a combat sequence. The film was promoted as featuring Jackie Chan fighting Arnold Schwarzenegger on screen for the first time, two of cinema's most legendary action heroes going toe-to-toe. Both men were also listed as producers on the film. IMDb. While critics universally agreed that the scene was underwhelming relative to its historical billing, two of action cinema's giants, meeting decades after their respective peaks, the fact of it is real and genuinely notable. Both Chan and Schwarzenegger dominated global action cinema through the 1980s and 1990s, and a collaboration between them had been a hypothetical dream for action fans for many years. That it finally happened in an obscure Russian-Chinese co-production rather than a Hollywood tentpole, and for only a few minutes of screen time, is one of the more peculiar footnotes in the history of the genre. Awards and recognition. Arnold Schwarzenegger was nominated at the 41st Golden Raspberry Awards for Worst Supporting Actor for his role as James Hook. This was the film's only notable awards recognition, a distinction that simultaneously confirmed its critical status as a below-par production and ensured it a small measure of pop culture immortality as a certified bad movie. Wikipedia. The Razzies nomination for Schwarzenegger was notable in that the character he played had almost no bearing on the main plot, making it a nomination not just for a poor performance but for the particular brand of high-profile irrelevance that Iron Mask specialized in with its celebrity cast members. The box office story of Iron Mask is, in the simplest terms, one of the most dramatic mismatches between investment and return in recent international co-production history. The film carried an estimated production budget of $49 million and earned a worldwide gross of just $8,685,794. Even taking the slightly lower Wikipedia-cited budget figure of $48 million, the film recovered less than one-fifth of its production costs from theatrical revenue alone, a shortfall so severe that it effectively ended the immediate prospects of the franchise and marked Iron Mask as one of the costlier commercial disappointments in Russian-Chinese cinema. IMDb. The numbers tracking service confirmed the film's international box office at $8,310,354, with no reported domestic, U.S., theatrical gross, reflecting the fact that the film never received a traditional cinema release in the American market, going straight to digital and VOD instead. The discrepancy between that figure and the IMDb reported $8,685,794 likely represents additional revenue from smaller territories not captured in the primary tracking data. The numbers. To put this in context, a film needs to earn roughly 2.5 times its production budget at the worldwide box office just to break even after accounting for marketing, distribution, and theater exhibition costs. Iron Mask, earning approximately 1/6 of its production budget in global theatrical revenue, fell catastrophically short of that threshold. It was, by any meaningful financial measure, a major box office failure. The predecessor's success, why the stakes were so high. To understand how badly Iron Mask underperformed, it is essential to understand the commercial benchmark set by its predecessor. Vi, 2014, the first film in the franchise, was made on a budget of $26 million and earned $38.9 million at the box office. That is a healthy return, roughly 1.5 times the production cost in theatrical revenue alone, before ancillary revenues from home video, streaming, and television were added. Wikipedia. More importantly, the first film's Russian domestic performance was remarkable for a homegrown production. Box Office Mojo data shows that Forbidden Empire, the international title for Vi, earned $33,846,746 in the Russian CIS market in February 2014 alone, the month of its release. For the full year 2014, it ranked fourth on the Russian CIS annual box office chart with $34,056,718, placing it above major Hollywood productions like Noah, How to Train Your Dragon 2, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Despite going direct to DVD in most other countries, the film was the highest-grossing Russian movie of 2014, a distinction that carried enormous weight with investors and producers. Here was a domestically produced Russian fantasy film that had beaten the global competition on its home turf. The first film's success encouraged the producers to go big for the sequel, hence Schwarzenegger and Chan's casting. The logic of the sequel's ambition is entirely understandable in retrospect. If a $26 million Russian film with Jason Fleming and Charles Dance could crack the Russian top 5, what might a $49 million Russian-Chinese co-production with two globally recognized Hollywood icons achieve? IMDb inverse. The answer, as the numbers show, was considerably less than anyone had hoped. China, the critical failure in the most important market. China was arguably the most important market for Iron Mask. The entire structural logic of the Russian-Chinese co-production arrangement, the vast constellation of Chinese production and investment companies, the shift of the story's setting to China, the incorporation of Chinese cast members and mythology, was designed to position the film for success in the world's largest film market outside the United States. Box Office Mojo data for China shows that Iron Mask opened on the 16th of August, 2019, debuting at number 7 on its opening weekend with $2,052,195. By its second weekend, the film had fallen to number 20 with just $19,604, a week-on-week decline of 99%. Its total Chinese gross was $2,567,112. Box Office Mojo. This performance is devastating when measured against the aspirations of the production. The 99% drop from opening to second weekend is among the steepest recorded in any major market, indicating that audience word of mouth was essentially instantaneously negative, driving virtually the entire audience who would ever see the film into cinemas on its first weekend, with almost nobody returning for a second look or recommending it to friends. A review from Asian Film Strike confirmed the verdict. The sequel has been a flop both there and in Russia, making it clear that the film failed simultaneously in both of its co-production's home markets. Asian Film Strike. For context, August 2019 was an extraordinarily competitive period in Chinese cinemas. The film opened against strong local and international competition, and its $2 million opening was a fraction of what even modestly successful Hollywood productions were earning in China at the time. The Chinese co-producer's investment, routed through multiple production companies including China Film Group Corporation, Sparkle Roll Media, and others, yielded a return that was negligible relative to its scale. Russia. Modest performance but relative best market. While China proved to be a washout, Russia offered the film its strongest performance, though even here, the numbers fell far short of what the first film had achieved. Iron Mask opened in Russia on the 19th of September, 2019, debuting at number 1 on the Russian CIS weekend chart with $2,800,415 across 1,851 theaters, giving it a per-theater average of $1,512. The film's opening weekend made it the top film in Russia that week, which was a minor source of encouragement, but the context matters significantly. The film opened to the number 1 spot not because of overwhelming audience enthusiasm, but partly because it was a major domestic release in a relatively quiet weekend for competition, with it, Chapter 2, the biggest film in Russia that September, already past its peak. Box Office Mojo. For the full month of September 2019, Iron Mask was the number 2 film in Russia CIS with $4,836,153 in monthly gross, second only to it, Chapter 2, which earned $17,376,234 in the same month. The film's total Russian CIS gross reached $5,733,359. Box Office Mojo. Compare this to the first film's $34 million in its Russian opening period. Iron Mask earned approximately 1/6 of what its predecessor had managed in the same market, despite having a significantly larger budget, more famous international stars, and 5 years of sequel-building audience anticipation. The sequel's Russian audience was not merely smaller, it was a fraction of the franchise's existing fanbase. This comparison between the two films illustrates one of the central box office realities of sequels. A mediocre original can build anticipation for a follow-up, but only if the sequel delivers something that lives up to what the audience loved about the first. Russian audiences who remembered Forbidden Empire VI as a domestic triumph evidently did not find what they were looking for in Iron Mask. Vietnam and other smaller Asian markets. The film did receive theatrical releases in several smaller Asian markets, where it performed modestly but unremarkably. In Vietnam, Iron Mask opened on the 20th of September, 2019, debuting at number 7 with $57,278 from 707 theaters, a per-screen average of $81. By its second weekend, this had fallen 66.4% to $19,235 from 456 theaters. The total Vietnamese gross was $130,209. Box office imago. In Lithuania, the film opened on the 27th of September, 2019, earning $5,398 in its first weekend. By the fourth weekend, this had fallen to just $39. The total Lithuanian gross was $9,111. Box office imago. These figures are consistent with what the film achieved everywhere, a small initial curiosity-driven audience drawn by the novelty of a Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger pairing, followed by near total audience abandonment in subsequent weeks as negative word-of-mouth circulated. The United Kingdom, a COVID-19 complication. The UK release adds a particularly unfortunate layer to the film's commercial story. The film was released in the United Kingdom under the title The Iron Mask on the 10th of April, 2020. This date is significant. The 10th of April, 2020 was in the heart of the first UK COVID-19 lockdown, when cinemas across the country were closed entirely. The UK release was therefore effectively a direct-to-digital release by default, with no traditional cinema exhibition available. Whatever theatrical revenue the film might have earned from UK cinemas, even modest amounts, was rendered impossible by the timing. Wikipedia. The UK received Signature Entertainment's marketing push for the film during a period when the entire film exhibition industry was suspended. The digital release that followed did allow British viewers to access the film. but without the infrastructure of theatrical distribution, promotional screening events, or any of the normal mechanisms for building audience awareness and word of mouth, the UK commercial performance was negligible. The film was digitally released on demand and on DVD in the United States as Iron Mask on the 24th of November, 2020, released by Lionsgate, one of Hollywood's largest independent distributors. Crucially, there was no theatrical release of any kind in the US market. The film skipped cinemas entirely, going straight to VOD platforms and physical media. Wikipedia. The video release was handled on the 17th of November, 2020 by Lionsgate Home Entertainment, released as Iron Mask. The decision to bypass American cinemas entirely reflects the commercial reality that distributors recognized. By the time Iron Mask had been reviewed and discussed in Russia, China, the Philippines, Lithuania, and the UK, its reputation as a deeply troubled production was already well established. A US theatrical release would have required substantial marketing expenditure with little realistic prospect of meaningful returns. The numbers. The US straight-to-digital release also coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic's ongoing impact on theatrical exhibition, making VOD an even more natural default for a film that was never going to be a theatrical priority. Financial loss. Estimating the full damage. The true financial loss for Iron Mask is difficult to calculate precisely without access to the production company's full accounts, but the broad outlines are clear. With a production budget of approximately $48 to $49 million and worldwide theatrical gross of approximately $8.7 million, the film recovered roughly 18% of its production costs theatrically. Applying the standard industry rule of thumb, that marketing and distribution costs add roughly 50% to a film's production budget for major international releases, the total cost of making and releasing Iron Mask was likely in the region of $70 to $75 million. Against a theatrical gross of $8.7 million, the gap is enormous. One analysis of Russian film finances noted that VI2, Journey to China underperformed with an ROI below 2x despite a substantial outlay, underscoring the risks of overambitious international ambitions. The phrase below 2x is generous. The theatrical return on investment was far below even 1x, meaning the film did not come close to earning back its production costs from cinema ticket sales. Grokipedia. Some recovery would have come from home video, streaming licensing, and television sales, ancillary markets that often contribute significantly to a film's total financial picture, particularly for genre films with cult potential. The film's availability on VOD platforms in the US, UK, and other markets will have generated rental and purchase revenue. International broadcast rights, particularly in Russia, China, and Eastern Europe, will have added further income over the years following the theatrical release. However, it is virtually inconceivable that these ancillary revenues alone could have brought the film into profitability given the scale of the theatrical shortfall. The sequel's fate. No VI3 yet. The box office failure of Iron Mask had direct consequences for the franchise's future. A third installment, VI3, Travel to India, was originally set to be released in 2023 starring Jason Flemyng and Anna Cherina. However, it has been delayed for undisclosed reasons. Wikipedia. The connection between the commercial failure of Iron Mask and the stalling of VI3 is not officially confirmed, but is widely assumed. When a sequel earns less than 20% of its production budget in theatrical revenue, the prospect of assembling another large-scale multinational co-production around the same franchise becomes financially and commercially challenging. Investors who lost money on Iron Mask would need substantial reassurance about the revised commercial strategy before committing to a third installment, and the global film market's appetite for Russian-Chinese fantasy co-productions was already in question even before the pandemic further disrupted international theatrical distribution. Comparison with the predecessor, the full picture. The contrast between the two films' box office performances is instructive as a case study in how sequel ambition can misfire. The first film, VI, 2014, was made for $26 million and earned approximately $38.9 million worldwide, the majority of which came from Russia, where it was the highest-grossing domestic film of the year. It was, by the standards of Russian domestic cinema, a genuine success story. Iron Mask, made for nearly twice the budget at approximately $49 million, earned approximately $8.7 million worldwide, less than a quarter of the original's global take and a fraction of what was needed to break even. Russia, which had been the first film's primary market and financial bedrock, contributed approximately $5.7 million to the total, only about one-sixth of what Russian audiences paid to see the original. The film failed simultaneously in China, its intended new market, Russia, its established home market, and the English-speaking world, its aspired to international crossover market. This triple failure across every target market is unusual and reflects the fundamental challenge the film faced. In trying to be all things to all audiences, it became something that fully satisfied none of them. A lesson in international co-production risk. The box office performance of Iron Mask offers a sobering lesson about the economics of ambitious international co-productions. The rationale for making the film, leveraging the first film's Russian success to build a bigger, more international franchise supported by Chinese investment and Hollywood star power, was commercially logical on paper. The execution, however, produced a film that was too Russian for Chinese audiences, too Chinese for Russian audiences, and too unfamiliar for Western audiences to seek out. The $49 million budget suggests that producers understood they were making a large-scale spectacle that needed to perform across multiple markets to be viable. The $8.7 million global total suggests that none of those markets delivered in the way the producers had hoped. Whether through the film's poor critical reception, its troubled post-production and delayed release, the diluted screen time given to its marquee stars.